Welcome to Bedtime Stories for Night Owls. Tonight's story is Microtus, the Field Vole by Winifred Flower. Between the heather and grass stems on the hillside, you could just make out a small hole leading down among the roots. Suddenly, with no sound, a little face peered out from the hole. It was a grayish-brown face, blunt nose, with neat little ears, deep set in the fur, and bright, beady eyes. The young field vole raised his nose and sniffed inquisitively, his long whiskers quivering. He had never ventured far from home before, but this evening he felt a new restlessness urging him to leave the 4 brothers and sisters in the nursery and explore. He'd been born in the nest among the roots, which his mother had made by weaving loosely together bitten-off pieces of dry grass. She had fed and looked after her babies, who were at first blind and nearly hairless. Now, after a few weeks, they were growing independent. The little vole, whose name was Microtus, knew mouse etiquette. He sat up and began a thorough toilet. Every self-respecting mouse makes certain his body is in perfect condition before starting on an exploration. Microtus licked his tiny pink hands and washed his face with them. Licking them again with amazingly swift movements, he washed behind his ears. Then he licked his chest, his gray fluffy tummy, and his little flanks. Finally, he tried to reach a stumpy tail with his mouth, lost his balance, and rolled down the bank. Like lightning, he was on his feet, crouching motionless. Had an enemy seen him? Nothing stirred, and presently he darted off into a grass tunnel. The vole runs stretched in all directions through the grass roots, so that enemies looking down from above could see only the leaves of grass and nothing of their possible prey. Microtus stopped, washed his face again, and nibbled at a grass stem, holding it with both paws. When it was bitten through, he held the free end with one paw and went on chewing rapidly. 9 inches of grass went into his mouth during his minute's pause. Then he ran off again down the run. Soon he stopped, ate another blade of grass, and tried some clover. While he was finding he liked clover, he heard a tiny rustle and cowered flat. A grown-up vole ran past him down the tunnel. If Microtus had not made haste, the stronger vole might have bitten him badly. Warily he went on and found a thick grass tuft in which to curl up and sleep. During the weeks of late summer, Microtus slept in his tuft, deep in which he made himself a domed nest. He learned the way about the neighboring runs, learnt where to find water, and tried various experiments in food. As seeds ripened, he gnawed them open to reach the kernel. He found small snails and insects. One day he discovered his first acorn and bit into it, leaving clear traces of his 2 front teeth. He carried it back to his nest in his mouth. As the days passed, Microtus grew bigger. When he stretched up on tiptoe, he was just 4 inches long, though his tail never measured more than 1.5 inches. His back grew browner, his flanks shone golden in the sun, and his underside and muzzle became pure white. He found life good, with plenty to eat, and always new places to explore. New adventures into which he was led by his curiosity. One adventure was nearly his last. He had been collecting a little store of acorns, and other voles were fetching them from the same place. Microtus was arguing over a particular acorn with another young vole when he suddenly felt a chill of fear. Stopping, he cowered. They were both right out in the open. No other mouse was in sight, but something was slinking through the grass towards them. Both voles seemed unable to move. The something came nearer, showing gleaming eyes, white fangs bared in a snarl, and a brown snake-like body. Petrified with terror, they could only crouch, with fur erect and staring eyes. Then, suddenly, Microtus felt the power to run come back. But even as he turned, he felt the weasel almost on him. Then he heard a cry, and as he ran, with heart bumping against his little ribs, he realized it was the other vole which had cried. Back in his home, he had to wash at least 6 times before he felt calmer. As the days grew colder and the nights longer, Microtus, like all the voles, spent more time asleep. At intervals, he came out to nibble a few grass stems, for he did not fall into the deep winter sleep of his distant relation, the dormouse. One late afternoon, he emerged sleepily from his nest and blinked in amazement. Everything was white. He sniffed the white stuff, poked his nose into it, and found it wet and chilly. Puzzled, he at last found that his runs were still there, underneath a curious snow blanket. A little overexcited with the strange new world, Microtus forgot his usual caution. He began to run straight across an open snow space to a hole on the far side, without first looking and sniffing all around. Halfway across, he glanced upwards, and then ran faster than ever before in his life. In that glance, he had seen a white, ghost-like form with silent wings swooping down on him. He'd seen the huge eyes and cruel hooked beak and curving claws. The barn owl struck as Microtus reached the hole. The vole owed his life to the snow, for the owl's sense of distance was confused by its gleaming whiteness, and she clenched her claws too soon. Microtus screamed, but with a desperate effort he bolted into the hole, leaving the owl with nothing but a tiny bit of his skin and some hair. After that serious fright, Microtus never again ventured into the open without taking every precaution against attack, and for that reason he managed to live considerably longer than most of his brothers and sisters. The end. Sweet dreams, night owls.